Have you ever been laughed at by someone who had everything, while you were barely holding your life together? Imagine standing in a quiet cafe, counting your last few coins just to buy a single cup of coffee, and the billionaire behind you suddenly starts laughing. What would you do? Before we begin this powerful story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that kindness, courage, and dignity can change lives in ways we never expect. The rain had been falling since early morning, turning the streets into mirrors of gray clouds and neon lights. Inside the small corner cafe, the warm smell of roasted coffee beans wrapped around the few customers sitting quietly at their tables. Among them stood Daniel Harper, a tired-looking man in his mid-30s with gentle eyes and worn clothes. In his arms he carried a small girl wrapped in a pink jacket. Her name was Lily, his 6-year-old daughter. Daniel looked at the menu board for a long moment, then lowered his gaze to the few coins in his palm. They were the last coins he had. Just 3 years earlier, Daniel's life had been completely different. He had a stable job as a mechanic, a modest home, and a loving wife named Sarah. But life can change faster than anyone expects. Sarah had fallen seriously ill. The hospital bills drained their savings, then their house, then nearly everything they had. Daniel worked double shifts to support her treatment, but in the end, the illness still took her away. After Sarah's passing, Daniel was left alone with Lily, a mountain of debt, and a heart that felt permanently broken. Still, every morning he woke up with one purpose: Lily. He packed her school lunch, braided her messy hair the best he could, and walked her to school before searching for temporary work around the city. Some days he fixed cars. Other days he carried boxes at warehouses. Some days he earned nothing. That morning had been particularly hard. Daniel had just come from a job interview that ended with the same words he had heard too many times. "We'll call you." But they never did. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy, are we getting hot chocolate?" Daniel smiled softly. "Maybe next time, sweetheart." He approached the counter and cleared his throat. "Excuse me, how much for the smallest coffee?" $3, the barista replied kindly. Daniel counted his coins again. $2.75. He hesitated. Then Lily looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy, you look really tired." Daniel's chest tightened. "Okay," he said quietly. "One small coffee." He placed the coins on the counter. The barista counted them and paused. Daniel felt embarrassment creeping up his neck. "Sir, you're a little short." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm sorry. We'll just..." Then suddenly, laughter echoed behind him. It wasn't loud and cruel, but it carried a sharp edge that made the room turn silent. Daniel turned around. Standing behind him was a tall man in an expensive coat, holding a phone in one hand. The man looked like someone who had never worried about money a day in his life. His name was Victor Langston. Victor was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country. His face appeared on magazine covers and business news almost every week. People called him brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable. But in that moment, he was laughing. Daniel felt heat rising in his face. Victor looked at the coins on the counter, then at Daniel holding his daughter. "You're buying the last coffee in the cafe with pocket change," Victor said with a half smile. The room grew uncomfortable. Daniel took a breath. He had learned something during the hardest years of his life. Dignity doesn't depend on money. "It's not the last coffee in the cafe," Daniel said calmly. Victor raised an eyebrow. "It's the only one I can afford." For a moment, Victor said nothing. Then he laughed again. But this time, it sounded different. Not mocking. Curious. "You know," Victor said, stepping closer, "most people would beg, complain, or ask someone else to pay." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not most people." Lily tugged his sleeve again. "Daddy, it's okay. I'm not cold anymore." Victor looked at the little girl. Something shifted in his expression. He leaned toward the barista. "I'll take every coffee in the shop." The barista blinked. "Every coffee?" "Yes." Victor turned to Daniel. "Congratulations," he said with a small grin. "You just bought the last one." The cafe erupted in confused murmurs. But Daniel didn't laugh. He simply picked up the small cup placed in front of him and thanked the barista. "Come on, Lily," he said softly. They sat down at a small table near the window. Victor watched them for a moment, then walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Daniel shrugged. Victor sat down across from him. "Why didn't you ask for help?" Victor asked. Daniel stirred the coffee slowly. "Because my daughter is watching." Victor frowned. And she's learning how to face the world." Lily looked up proudly. My daddy fixes everything. Victor leaned back in his chair. For the first time that morning, the CEO looked thoughtful. Tell me something, Victor said. What happened to you? Daniel rarely talked about his life to strangers. But something about the question felt genuine. So he told him. About Sarah. About the hospital bills. About losing their home. About working every job he could find. And about Lily being the reason he never gave up. By the time Daniel finished, the coffee had gone cold. Victor had stopped smiling. You loved your wife a lot, he said quietly. Daniel nodded. And now everything you do is for her. Daniel shook his head. For Lily. Victor stared at the little girl drawing on a napkin with a crayon. Something in his chest felt strange. Because Victor Langston had built an empire. But he had also lost his family along the way. His marriage had ended years ago. His son barely spoke to him. And suddenly, this exhausted mechanic sitting in front of him looked richer. Victor stood up. Wait here, he said. Daniel frowned. Why? Victor only smiled. Because I want to test something. 20 minutes later, Victor returned. He placed a business card on the table. I run a company that builds advanced robotics, he said. But our maintenance department is a disaster. Daniel blinked. Victor crossed his arms. You said you're a mechanic, right? Yes. Good. Victor smiled. Because starting tomorrow, you're the head of my maintenance team. Daniel stared at him. You're joking. I never joke about business. Daniel looked down at Lily, who was smiling with chocolate on her lips from a free pastry the barista had given her. Why me? Daniel asked. Victor thought for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. Because a man who refuses to beg for coffee is a man I can trust with a company. Daniel felt his throat tighten. For the first time in years, hope entered the room. Months passed. Daniel worked harder than anyone at the company. He fixed machines others had given up on. He solved problems with creativity and patience. And slowly, Victor noticed something else. The employees respected Daniel, because he never forgot where he came from. One evening, Victor found Daniel in the workshop teaching a young intern how to repair a broken robotic arm. You're not even on the training staff, Victor said. Daniel smiled. Someone once gave me a chance. Victor nodded slowly, and that was the moment he realized something. The man who once counted coins for coffee had become the heart of the company. Years later, when reporters asked Victor Langston about the best investment he ever made, he surprised everyone. It wasn't a technology, he said. It was a man with $2.75, and a daughter who believed he could fix anything. And Daniel Harper did, not just machines, but hope. So if this story touched your heart, remember this: people are not defined by the money in their pockets, but by the strength in their character. And sometimes, the person being laughed at today becomes the reason someone believes in tomorrow. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because more powerful stories are waiting for you in the next video.